So, now that all the organizational issues have hopefully been clarified, we can really get started. And we are delighted that Jürgen Dusel, who has been for a long time the Federal Government Commissioner for Matters Relating to Persons with Disabilities for 8 years. He has been doing this for 8 years. Democracy needs inclusion. That's his motto. Tourism needs inclusion and accessible offers as well. That's his cause. As Jürgen Dusel cannot be with us live, he has registered his speech. So we are going to watch this video. There he is. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to extend a warm welcome to you all again this year, albeit via video from the Kleisthaus. And I'm delighted that you are once again addressing the topic of accessible tourism. This is also very necessary because, unfortunately, this topic still tends to be a niche area within the tourism sector as a whole, even though the potential for accessible tourism is actually very high. And the tourism industry should have a keen interest in promoting it. Unfortunately, this is still not the case. And I would like to begin with a quote from an American intellectual of the last century, whom I find very interesting, namely Susan Sontag, who said, "I haven't been everywhere, but it's on my list." End of quote. This statement is essentially driven by great curiosity and great joy in traveling, which for many people is absolutely natural. When you travel, you experience things, you can simply experience new things. You also shift your own boundaries of perception, and it is not for nothing that people say that traveling is a truly educational experience. Yet for many people with disabilities, and also for older people who are increasingly living with disabilities, a quote from Matthias Claudius is probably more applicable, who once said, when someone goes on a journey, they have something to talk and complain about. Specifically, this means that people with disabilities or people with limited mobility or old age, for example, have a lot to say and worry about the barriers that exist when you want to go on a trip. This starts, for example, with the fact that they cannot access barrier-free information materials and cannot find out anything about the destinations that are available. It continues with the journey to the holiday resort, for example. And this journey must, of course, also be barrier-free for people with disabilities. Otherwise, they will not be able to get there at all, or will have great difficulty doing so. And then the joy of traveling and the joy of the holiday is already over, so to speak. Of course, the destination, the hotel and the holiday apartment must be accessible, but that is not enough, of course, because you also want to leave the hotel sometimes. You want to attend cultural events, for example. And then the same questions arise. Can I get to the festivals, for example? Can I get into the museum? What about if I want to visit an exhibition, for example? Is the ticketing accessible? Is infrastructure accessible? What about communication? Ladies and gentlemen, as I said earlier, the topic of accessible tourism has great potential. And it's not about charity, it's not about kindness, it's about the guaranteed rights of people with disabilities. And of course, it's also about money, because people with disabilities also want to spend their money, for example, on a holiday. But when you consider that we are an increasingly aging population in Germany, meaning that we are getting older and older, that there is, of course, a greater likelihood that we will become increasingly dependent on accessibility in old age, then it is really difficult to understand why on earth the tourism industry is still so hesitant in this regard. Ladies and gentlemen, in my view, accessible tourism is a topic for the future, and in my view, a topic of quality. Because only accessible tourism actually deserves the term quality tourism. It makes no sense to offer tourist services that contain barriers. In this respect, we are still coping with the same topic. I'm delighted that you are still with us. Obviously, we still need a lot of staying power, but we have got it. And on this note, I wish you a very successful event.